Hello and welcome to the Pharma podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Comstock. A thriving startup ecosystem is essential to the health of the modern life sciences industry, as it provides an incubator for innovative ideas that might be too high risk for larger, more established companies. But that doesn't mean it's easy to be a biotech startup. With so many small companies chasing the biotech dream, getting a foot in the door with big pharma or venture capitalists isn't as easy as just having a great idea or product. Enter innovation hubs, where like-minded startups can band together, get support on their journeys, and just maybe increase their chances of getting that all-important meeting. To discuss this rich topic on today's podcast, brought to you by Kadans Science Partners, I'm joined by Senior Director of Business Development at Astellas, Bradley Hardiman, Mike Mairi, Head of the Mairi Advisory Services, and Mairi Dillon, Kadans Ecosystem Manager for UK and Ireland. So thank you all so much for joining me. I'm very excited about this conversation, but before we get too far into it, let's give the folks just a little bit of idea of who each of you are and how your background connects to this topic. So maybe we'll just go one at a time, talk a little bit about, about the work that you do and how that connects to some of these concepts we're talking about startups and startup ecosystems. Maybe we can just go in the order I did in the intro and start with Bradley.
Hi, I'm Bradley Hardiman. I work for Astellas Pharma Europe in their BD team. So I'm responsible for sort of scouting and transaction for external innovation that we would like to bring in within Astellas. And as part of that, I'm also in the ventures team. We have a corporate venture arm called Astellas Venture Management, and I represent them as well. I have a European-wide remit, so we're looking for innovation across the whole of Europe, and so we do really have to be efficient with what we do. And this will come out, I think, in this conversation about the benefit of clusters that help people like me do our jobs a little bit better.
And Michael, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Dr. Mike Mairi. I run my own company. It's called Mairi International Partners Limited. So we are a commercial advisory. Basically, I work usually with early stage innovators, people who have maybe got an early stage company, a startup, right through to SMEs. And my role is really to help them get onto the commercial path in the most productive way. And ultimately, I do three things. I assess their readiness to do a deal. I then build the deal, and then either working with them or leading for them, I'll then negotiate the deals. And in terms of how that all works in the ecosystem, touching on something Bradley's already said, it's getting the connections right, and that's not a trivial thing. So that's broadly what I do.
Mairi?
Getting the connections right. I think that's a good point to draw out later in the conversation. So Mairi Dillon. So I head up our ecosystem services for the UK and Ireland at Kadans Science Partners. Kadans, for those who don't know it, we are a pan-European property developer. We are in 6 countries. We've got over 400 tenants, and we have an awful lot of life sciences and healthcare tenants. Within my role, I support those tenants to success. And that can mean a variety of things, but it's how do we add value beyond bricks and mortar? And actually our tenants are big pharma, as well as small companies, and big pharma often want to speak to people innovating and doing all these exciting things. And likewise, those smaller companies want to be engaged with big pharma. Delighted to have Bradley and Mike here today. We've known each other for a number of years, seen each other out on the circuit, in the various events and on panels and various things. And I think they've got a lot of knowledge on the topic, hopefully, to share.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again for joining me. So I tried to give a little bit of an overview in the intro of sort of how this ecosystem works, what the startups bring to the table, and what the larger pharma partners bring to the table, and why. What are the circumstances in which, the one is trying to get the attention of the other? But maybe if somebody, maybe Mike, I see you're nodding along, wants to kind of paint that picture a little bit just to set the stage for us of, how all these pieces fit together and what everybody's chasing here.
So Bradley's got one of the hardest jobs in the world. So he's the business face of a fairly large multinational company. They work in lots of different therapy areas. So the audience that they're broadcasting to is immense. and there's only a few Bradleys on the team, and he'll come back to that, I'm sure. So the challenge for small innovative companies is how on earth do they get visibility, let alone mentioned or noticed? And once you've got visibility, how do you maintain it? And it's not no small matter. So a lot of early stage companies are founded by scientists who are used to the idea that if they publish a fantastic piece of science, they just get lots of citations, people can find them and will find them. They get a shock when they go into the world of business and find that however wonderful their stuff is, nobody is actually beating a track to their door because nobody knows them, nobody knows what they're doing. And they also assume that maybe they have to have a certain amount of information or data already secured before they can talk to the big players. But it's my experience that you can't go out too early. Go out and start talking and engaging with the industry for several reasons. One is you'll start to do a bit of range finding. You'll figure out which parts of the industry are receptive to you, which parts are not. You'll also start to find whether you're getting repeated opportunities and chances to talk to people, the same people. Are they coming back and finding you at conferences? Are you finding them? And the ecosystem, as you put it, is utterly dependent these days on the innovators finding the big pharma partners and the big pharma partners finding the innovations that they need. 20, 30 years ago, big pharma was still doing a lot of its own R&D. It's a rare thing now. And so that's the symbiosis that needs to have a chance to thrive. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of knowledge, I think, to make it work well.
Just drawing on that, I guess you talked about visibility and the ability, I guess, to start those conversations early. Yeah. But sometimes I think, and Bradley, you'll probably have a view on this, when you speak to early stage companies, it's a case of, but where do you start within a big company like Astellas, right? Because they have multiple departments and multiple different roles. And sometimes you don't really understand, the whole learning how those different departments operate and how large pharma actually engages with early stage innovation. That's a huge exercise in itself. Yeah. And obviously that's where you come in a lot with your clients and help them to navigate that. But yeah, Bradley, I don't know if you want to comment on that, because I certainly hear that a lot from our tenants when they kind of say, well, yeah, we want to speak to big pharma. And then it's kind of a case of, but where do I start? Where do I go in?
Yes, I think just to sort of, I guess, reiterate what you guys have said, on one half, you have a number of small biotech companies you're wanting to be visible, and there's so much fantastic innovation out there. It's easy to sort of get lost in the weeds of that, and how do you stand out, and how do you make contact? And then in making contact, pharma companies and all large companies could be this sort of big anonymous organization that sort of, it's difficult to navigate and to work out where you need to be and who you need to speak to. And so it's our jobs to be visible on both sides, because we could just do like desktop research and see what companies are out there. But there are so many companies in stealth that are great and maybe
also,
not.
Also, how boring would that be, Bradley? How boring would that be if you were doing desktop research as well? Let's be honest. Yeah. We like going out and seeing each other and, engaging. Yeah. And it matters a lot in our roles.
We'll come back to the benefits of face-to-face contact as well. But just in that first instance of finding those companies, and then on the other side, working out how pharma works and how to get into pharma, it is that you can't just sit where you are. You have to go out and find these people. And it's incumbent on both of us as well. So both small biotech to be as visible as they can, and then big pharma to really search and evaluate, scout, transact in these areas of interest to you, because then it gets our message across as well about what we're looking for, because then that saves a lot of time and effort on both sides.
I think Michael made a good point earlier that this notion of networking, connectivity, connection, it might seem obvious, but to startup founders who come from the science background, it can be a bit of a shock that your science, the merits of your science are not all you need to find a partner. And so I guess my next question is, how does this connectivity happen? And what are some of the venues where where we talk about being in the right place at the right time. What are some of the right places?
Well, on one hand, you can set yourself up in one of the many clusters around the UK or Europe or wherever, and I'm sure Bradley will have some views on that. But the fact of the matter is the early stage company has to understand where it wants to end up, what's the nature of the partnership, with whom, all of that. And I think what's often missing from early stage companies is that realization. They think they're just going to keep doing some really clever science and develop some seminal product, and it's all going to flow from that, and it doesn't. So get out to the business conferences, get out to the science conferences as well. And when I'm working with companies, and I'm working with one company at the moment, MetalloBio, we've got our 2 chemists who, until 6 months ago, had never gone to conferences. We've trained them to be science BD guys, and they're loving it, and they're bringing us leads in. So, you can actually, you can make the odds better for yourself as a small company by looking at who have you got, how can you deploy them. And I think that it's not just a single hit. I mean, if I represent a company and go to talk to Bradley, that's okay. We know each other, we can find each other. But if Bradley then goes back to Astellas, one of his science colleagues had already heard of this from one of our science guys, that's already a nice, strong uplift. There's some resonance there immediately. So it's I think Bradley said it a few minutes ago, it's not a one-off. You don't do it once. You have to have a campaign. You need to go to the same events or the right events. You have to have a plan for the event. This is the other thing. I went to Bio many years ago, and a girl who beat me to the head of a BD job, I'm not being bitter at all, I'm not, she was wandering around for 4 days trying to get meetings. Well, Bio's got 25 to 30,000 delegates. You spend 12 weeks before that event plotting your campaign there, and she hadn't done it. And I thought, and you beat me to the job. That's not fair.
I'd love it if she listens to this, but anyway.
Yeah.
No, but actually, I think your point around the strategic piece here actually really matters, because let's be honest, if you're an early stage company, you are not just trying to meet with the big farmers, you're also trying to raise money, you're also trying to build a team, you're also trying to actually, build your product and be in the lab, and you're wearing all these different hats. And so ultimately, being planning and being more considerate about where you spend your time matters. And I think from our perspective as Kadans, we're fairly new in the UK. We're kind of building our presence. And the first thing that we're doing deliberately for the benefit of our tenants and prospective and future tenants is bringing existing networks and conferences and organizations who I know have quality people in the room and are going to talk about topics that matter to our prospective community closer to us as a first point of call. So that my tenants in our buildings are going to instantly be able, they can go to the lab in the morning and then pop downstairs in the afternoon and do some BD networking. Or, later that evening, have a drink with some big pharmas after a panel discussion about a particular topic. So if we create those sort of environments from our perspective, that's really important. But it's not just, I suppose, about just our buildings. It's about all the other things that happen in different locations. Bradley, you're based in Cambridge. You're very much part of that Cambridge ecosystem. It's funny. Someone told me this about Cambridge having almost being like a field of wildflowers, and it has sort of pockets of activity, and different flowers grow up at different times. And you can't really, it's wild, so you can't really tame it. It's not cute, a lovely rose garden. It doesn't work like this, right? And so that's the nature of that dynamic, vibrant ecosystem where you're going to get you bump into the really good people, and there's an element of sort of spontaneity in it as well, but it has to be planned too.
Yes.
And I keep saying that it's you that told me that story, Bradley, and it wasn't, and I can't remember who it was, but anyway.
But I mean, I do agree. It's almost paradoxical that you need that sort of planned serendipity with this. You need a plan when you go to these conferences, because you're not going to have the meetings if you don't. But likewise, understand the value of just bumping into somebody that you've met before. Because the reality of partnering is that you'll never do the deal the first time you meet. These things happen, they evolve over time, over multiple meetings. And it's when you sort of both parties get out there, meet people, that either through 1 or 2 degrees of separation, you can get an introduction, build that trust, build that camaraderie. And it is that serendipity of having a coffee or bumping into someone at an event, either a big conference or just a small networking event, that you can do that. And it's planned serendipity, which sounds sort of counterintuitive.
I get it.
Keeping that visibility and in your radar, really, aren't you? And also it's kind of indicating that you understand that you need to be in the right places, isn't it? And that you're both aligned, that you're in the same places, which matters.
I mean, yeah, another way to say it would be kind of maximizing opportunities for serendipity, right?
Yeah.
And actually, a lot of what we will be doing and trying to create with our facilities and our locations is about that. It's maximizing those opportunities for different individuals at different levels in the business, in different subsectors, and with different aims to increase knowledge, to provide those business development opportunities. And you need people like Mike as well in that conversation, in the sense that, yes, you've got the small companies who want to make friends with Bradley, absolutely. But actually, they probably need a bit of help to navigate that journey a lot of the time.
Yes, it's how I make my money. So I'm delighted that it exists. But joking aside, no, there is that need. And I think it's one of the other aspects of being a small company is very often you don't know what you don't know. You're moving into business, you just don't know how it happens. I've met people, well, my wife's one of them. She thinks networking is going out and having too much wine and beer.
You never do that, do you, Mike?
I've never done
that,
ever, clearly. But joking aside, I mean, this is what happens. You go to the big events and you discover that you're waiting in a queue to go to one big company's reception, and the person standing beside you is the person that you were trying to find the 3-4 weeks before the event. Just hadn't got hold of them, and there they are, and they're in the same mode as you are. They're there to do business. They're there to open conversations, and it's the idea that you have to keep the conversations going on. They grow with time. So having a deliberate campaign, if you're a small company, of don't bombard everybody, but if you're targeting Bradley every 6 months ago or so, just a short email just to let you know we'll be at Bio, and if you've got time, great to catch up with you. We've done another mouse study now, and we're moving on. Whatever the piece of information is, because it means that from the big pharma person's point of view, they're getting to know you better. There's, as you said, Mairi, that they know that you're going to the right events. You're now visible. And you are on the radar. You may never get the deal. It may be that you're not quite in the right space, but both parties are learning about each other and figuring that out. It's really hard to do in a single 30-minute exchange. You just can't do it. You have to go time and again and be prepared for quite a long thing. I mean, what was it Lee Trevino said? He found that the more he practiced, the luckier he got, that famous phrase. And I think it's the same thing, getting into the...
And actually, I think that also is absolutely true for if you're going out to VCs and looking for funding. It's a case of little and often and having a plan. But I mean, Bradley, how many emails do you get a day from companies?
So from people that I don't know, all targeting me by name, so they know me, approximately 30 to 40 a day.
Wow.
And so, it's almost impossible to sort of go through them, respond to them, and to work out which ones are in scope. But coming back to your point, if it comes from somebody that I know, here's an update, we've spoken, good to see you again. When do we go for a coffee? Then just instinctively, I will know that person, more likely to open that email, and more likely to respond. And again, it's that little and often, the updates, building that trust, building that camaraderie, almost sort of becoming friends.
Yeah.
Because that helps with referrals, it helps with contacts, it helps with updates. And so that FaceTime and the networking is very, very important.
Do you find...
By the way, this advice pretty much completely applies also to building a relationship with journalists. So build the skills.
Good plug. Well
but
done.
I want to move on. Mairi mentioned venture. I want to talk about venture and what's similar and different there, and also this idea of the clusters. We've talked about clusters a lot. People have been bringing them up. So, what is a cluster?
It's a very fashionable word. Anyway,
how does it fit into all of this?
Well, I suppose, it occurred to me, we talked a little bit about the idea is that, when you're perhaps looking to engage with big pharma, you might need a sponsor or a champion to actually help you along that journey, right? And I think both of you can, in your roles have seen that and how that works in practice. And obviously the little and often, the having a plan, the understanding the criteria that you fit into, doing your homework before you spend all that time chasing after Astellas or JSK or whoever. Because let's be honest, if you haven't done your homework first and then you spend all your time going after this, it's exactly the same when. And I see it all the time actually with companies looking to raise early stage capital, and they go, oh well, that person is in healthcare, therefore I'm going to go after them. But they haven't looked at their portfolio to understand that actually they've already invested in something that's pretty damn the same. Or, for example, they're at the end of their fund cycle. Mm-hmm. There's no money. Realistically, they're not going to be able to invest in you. Don't waste your time. And that's, again, why that ecosystem network matters a lot. And again, I suppose it's, for us, I think we've all been doing this and engaging with different life science stakeholders and networks and communities and ecosystems for a while. So it's quite natural for us of who to go to and ask.
Yeah.
But then that won't be natural, will it, for a lot of early stage companies?
No, you got the scientist staring at his or her shoes, in a dark corner of the networking opening reception, and you go, you're here to speak to people, go over and say something to somebody. And
sometimes that's just not natural,
No, it's not.
They need help.
Bradley, I know if I needed to get hold of one of your colleagues in Astellas, I would just contact you and say, who should I be speaking to, or who's the head of R&D in a certain area? And I think you said it a few moments ago, the small degrees of separation. And I think that's another thing that's just not often appreciated, is part of the currency is, as a player in this, is you give and you take. So sometimes you're giving leads, making phone numbers available or email addresses available to people and introducing them. So I'm very confident if I had to speak to somebody that Bradley knew, maybe even from another company where there's no competition as such, an email from Bradley saying, "Oh, can I introduce this guy Mike Mairi to you?" That's gold dust, because that's a pre-qualified introduction straight away.
Yeah.
And that's a massive accelerator. And if it's in the other direction, I guess for you, Bradley, it's great. You go, oh God, I know who this is. I'll answer this email.
Yeah, and actually, I'm just thinking,
I'm not about to be sold a timeshare,
Out of the 40, he might pick you. Yeah, but actually, you've done that, right? Whereas I've sent companies to you that need advice around spinning out, and you've picked them up straight away.
Sure.
And whereas perhaps, maybe that wouldn't have been top of your list otherwise, or maybe it would have just taken you a bit longer to get back to. And actually, that's kind of coming back to the cluster, however you might term that, the innovation hub or ecosystem piece. Those people who can do that currency and those favors and those warm introductions, that's how things operate. That's how things move forward a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah. I hate the phrase it's a contact sport, because people trot it out, and they're usually the people who are quite introverted. And I think, you've read it somewhere, right? So, but it is that thing. And if you think about it, it goes on in all walks of life. It's not just unique to this ecosystem we're in. It's that there's a degree of trust or reputation that travels with the introduction. And that's really important.
And that, again, going back to the VC side, matters hugely as well, because ultimately, again, kind of similar to the number of emails that Bradley's receiving, they'll be receiving hundreds of decks per week. And realistically, again, if you can cut through that because of a trusted individual who's pre-qualified you, and actually I do that fairly regularly, where I'll send decks on to investor contacts. But I'll be honest, I want the deck to be in a good form. I don't want them to be asking for silly money because I don't want to waste that contact because the other person is my peer and I respect them, and I don't want them to look at me and go, come on, Mairi, why are you sending me that rubbish?
But you've been there as well, Bradley, as an investor.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. But I guess the other benefit of these contacts is that if a small company goes to Michael and says, okay, what are Astellas interested in? Because we've had that conversation and he has an idea of what we're after, he can tell them, don't waste your time. They're not interested in anti-infectives, for example. And that sort of knowledge. And likewise, you could say, don't go to that fund. They're at the end of their fund cycle. They're not investing in new companies. However, I hear on the grapevine they're just about to launch. Maybe now is the time to warm them up on a face-to-face conversation without going in with a cold approach and a cold ask.
Yep.
Because again, that local knowledge and that insight that we can offer to each other and to the other sort of players in the clusters, that can be incredibly valuable. And it's easier when you're all sort of in the same sort of geographic area. And this is why clusters work, because you get those people that have the knowledge of everybody else in that cluster.
It's interesting. You might think that being in a space with a bunch of other startups could be detrimental because you're just a face in the crowd, but it actually helps you, almost paradoxically, it helps you stand out because of this dynamic we're talking about of kind of how these deals get done. But talk me through that a little bit, Bradley. So if you're encountering a cluster of startups, how do you make FaceTime for the individuals in it?
Yeah, so what'll happen is, there'll be that sort of spark of chemistry. They'll say something that resonates to you, either in terms of what they're going after and what they're doing, if that sort of works with your strategy internally. Then there'll be that, actually, no, I like how you work. I like what you say. I like what you're doing. Let's engage further. And then internally within Astellas, I become a champion for that. And everybody needs a champion, either within VCs, within pharma. You need that. And if you can get more than one champion, even better, coming back to Mike's point of that sort of multi-touch point, both within the research and then within BD. But it's odd because there is that, you just get that spark. You see a dozen company pitches, and then for whatever reason, that one will resonate, and you go, I want to talk to them.
Yeah.
Okay, because they're doing what I'm interested in. They're at the right stage. They're doing the right modality, the right biology of what we like. We want to be the partner of choice. Yes, let's engage in that. And it's, you would think, and as your question sort of, it doesn't actually matter if there's a whole sea of people, because those ones that are interesting to you stand out to you, and it's it doesn't get lost in a sea of sort of other pitches. And I think everybody is the same, and this is why different companies in the cluster can be there, do what they want, and then they'll find their different partners as they come in.
Be found by them. Yeah.
Yes.
But also, I mean, you're going fishing, right? You use the term the sea, right? I mean, you want to go fishing in a place that has fish. You want to know that there's some good quality fish that are being fed well, nurtured, they're all different colors, but you want to go fishing. And I guess for us, it's a case of, I want to create the pond that you want to come to, right? Because it's, sorry, I know.
Wonderful analogy.
Oh yeah, great. But actually, I think that does kind of matter, because it's a case of your time poor, because you've got a small team. You want to go to a place that's going to show you lots of good quality stuff. And actually, then, you might invest in one particular company, or you might do a deal for another that, then gets a bit of a splash. It starts growing, and then that's reinvested, or that sort of the ripple effect. Yeah. Sorry, even more pond analogies there. I'm still going. But, the ripple effect of that's really important, because then actually the companies around that company can potentially benefit, because everybody went, so-and-so biotech got X many millions, and, where are they based? Who else is there? And that also helps just continue the evolution of the area.
Well, we're talking about evolution. We started with wildflowers and we're talking about fish now. So it's all happening. But yeah, no, exactly. And I think the other thing, which has to be said, that a cluster can deliver that an isolated location for a company can't, is not every company makes it. Small companies run out of money, fail. And, if they've got 5 or 10 staff, talented chemists, biologists, whatever, in a cluster, it's a two-way road there, which is for the other companies, there's now a good talent pool that they can draw on quite close by. And for the people who've gone to the cluster, maybe in one company, it hasn't worked out, it's not the end of the road. They're in a place where there's another opportunity within reach, which is quite important.
100%. And actually, when we think about, for example, we're building Europe's largest commercial life science labs in Canary Wharf. That's a joint venture with Canary Wharf Group. It will be 23 floors. It will be larger than Oxford Science Park under one roof. And actually, when I talk and think about what we're creating there, for me, it's not just the physical amenities and the specialized assets. It's got to be around all the other components. And actually, it goes down to people, it goes down to culture, it goes to alignment. And when we think about talent, it's not just the young, clever people coming out of the great London universities. They're obviously very important, but actually it's people in tech who might, move over to life sciences. When we think about our future businesses, it's also having a place where those non-executive directors and those C-suite people who really supercharge and drive businesses want to come and stay and base themselves, not just for their first company, but for their third company, because they have to think about the future. So, all these factors, I think really matter and play into that, why you would spend time there. And then hopefully you attract individuals like yourself closer. And that helps, seed the future innovations and provide that supportive environment.
Definitely. There was a lovely story, Mark Ferguson, a professor at Manchester University, when they built the Grafton Centre, which was an incubator building. The university did not want there to be a cafe in there. They wanted it all to be labs, desks, more labs, another lab. Can we make that cupboard into a lab? Yes, we can.
Poor scientists, not allowed out for a cup of tea.
No. But Mark said, the problem was that the opportunity for exchange, for connection was just not there. People were going to come into the building and go off to the little rabbit hutch of a lab all day and all the rest. So he cleverly said, well, instead of a restaurant, shall we have a data exchange centre? And the university thought it was a great idea. It happened to be a data exchange centre with hot and cold meals, sandwiches, coffee, tables you could sit down in. It probably to our untrained eyes looked a little like a restaurant, but anyway, that's what they did. And it's just so, that's really the key thing there, isn't it? Is people wander through and there's chance connections, but they're not completely chance because you've created that environment as well.
But I think it's interesting because we're not just one location in the UK. We're not just one location in Europe. We're multi-locations. And let's be honest, we work in life sciences and healthcare. It's a global industry. Mm-hmm. So I think we're all advocates of the physical connectivity and the being there and doing that strategically. But it's also, how do those locations have international reach as well? Which obviously can't always physically be done. Yes, delegation visits, etc., are really important. But how do you create? So we've got a facility on Baberham Research Campus, and Baberham's internationally renowned. They've got that reach. People know where Baberham is in other locations. So that also matters when you're thinking long term as a business of attracting in big pharma from Japan or the States or wherever, of being in a location that they're actually going to recognize. I
think that's true.
The other point on that is, you said that your science is global, pharma is global, but venture capital money is curiously local.
That's true. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a weird sort of phenomenon, and it's no coincidence that the big VCs in the US are based in Boston or Silicon Valley. The big VCs in kind of Europe are based in the clusters, so London, Oxford, Cambridge, the Benelux, Medicon Valley, because in a sort of post-deal sort of consideration as well. Signing the contract is just the beginning of your relationship. That post, once the deal is done, how you manage that deal, if it's an investment, if it's a partnership, and that is easier if you are geographically located in the same area, or at least easy to get to by transport. It's a train or a car ride. If it's within an hour, that makes such a difference to my life if I'm going to visit a company that I've invested in or a company that I've partnered with.
Yeah.
And if there's a company that you've invested in or partnered with, you actually do want more face time if you can get it, right? Because it's about building trust, realistically. And not that you can't do that virtually.
No, it's different.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
So we're almost out of time. I want to make sure we get to everything. So I just want to take just a few minutes to talk about Cambridge in particular. And, fits right in with what we've just been talking about. Why is it one of these sort of good hubs? Why is it a good place for startups to be? And then we'll go into kind of our closing final question.
Sure. So I mean, I can sort of speak to that. When Astellas decided to open an office for innovation in Europe, it was sort of, okay, we're doing it in Europe. Where in Europe? The UK. Where in the UK? And the obvious sort of answer was London, because all of the big pharma have their headquarters in London. And then sort of some bright spark within Astellas as well. Why don't we actually go where the action is? And that's why they sort of chose Cambridge to be there, to take advantage of that serendipity and the wildflowers, and to sort of bump into people just walking down the street when you go for lunch. And I think what makes Cambridge a good cluster, an excellent cluster, it has the three things that I think are sort of necessary for the success of a cluster. World-class research. Okay, the science that is generated there, but then also the students, PhD students, postdocs that are attracted to the university that then become the employees of these companies that start there. An infrastructure of lab and office space where people can work and sort of execute their ideas, and then money, and local money as well, because if there's a pot of local money that can then attract international money, that sort of that point of nucleation and that catalyst to get things done. And I think those are the three things that make a good cluster.
Can I add to that in Cambridge? Because actually, number one, because I think I absolutely agree. Cambridge, though, actually doesn't have much lab space at the moment. So we are building, which we're really excited about bringing on some new labs there. Just get that plug in. But the other thing I got to say.
A plug?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice. Anyway.
But the other thing actually that I think is particularly unique about Cambridge, from my experience, is the people element of the people who are active in that ecosystem, who are driving the labs, the money, the infrastructure, they're driving what makes and the phenomenal research. Because what I feel when you walk into Cambridge events or activities is often you'll know who the ecosystem drivers are in the room. They're really open. They'll help you. They know each other. They work with each other. They're always putting the ladder down. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really super important, where they that kind of values piece, in that they recognize that Cambridge has done some really great things for them, so they want to do more for other people and the next generation of companies. And I think that's quite special. And that's the sort of thing that we'd love to encourage with some of the new locations that we're investing in across the UK, of getting those sort of champions. Actually, we've used the word in other forms earlier in the conversation, but those kind of champions in the region who can really help with that next generation of opportunity.
Yeah, and you can see it from the other side. So I work with some companies that are not in clusters, and it's harder. It's just harder. So you said about the access to money, Bradley, and also infrastructure, lab space. And we're in an era where British universities, like universities all around the globe, want to be involved in innovation, and there are pro-vice chancellors getting well fed at swanky dinners talking about it. I don't think they really understand it at all, frankly. I think it's, innovation. Yeah, we do that because the neighbouring university in our city has been doing it for 10 years longer than us. We've got to be up there doing it. But what they're not doing...
We must have an innovation centre. That's also,
that helps, absolutely. And the other thing is, where do you hatch these new companies, right? So in Sheffield, where I do a lot of the work, my goodness, the lab space is desperately thin on the ground. And, you'll get, if you've got 5 staff, they won't be in the same building. They'll be in 3 different buildings. That's no good. That slows the company growth down, because we've talked about the connectivity. Just think of the connectivity of 3 or 4 bright people working in the same lab every day. Stuff happens. They'll riff off each other. You don't get that when somebody's a bus ride away across the city in a converted garage in some suburb. And that's actually something I know of that's happened near us. So, that access to funding, but particularly to infrastructure, the ability to hatch a company, grow it, and then for it to have somewhere else to go to without everybody having to move to another region, or, taking your young children out of the local school that you love and it took you years of, bribery to get them into in the first place, and you're off somewhere else. So
no, and actually, I mean, that's for us is such a big driver in our business model, right? And we've got 2.2 million square foot that we're bringing online across the UK in the coming years, and that's lab and office space. But I guess, from our perspective, it is about location, and it does need to have all the wonderful components that we've just talked about for it to make it worthwhile for us to put those facilities there. But yeah, we've got companies who are crying out for lab space, and they're having to look 3 years ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately they are being disrupted, and it's not capital efficient. And, that whole disruption of that cycle is a significant problem that's going to continue happening for a while. I mean, there's a lot of stock coming on now, which will resolve that problem, but it's probably going to be stock in particular areas because of the other factors in terms of the investments.
And it's important to have, a company needs to have its own space. This is the other problem. So if the company's forced to take space in a shared laboratory, you've got the double whammy of a company with confidential work going on in a very public environment. But you've also got staff in the company operating to certain industry standards, or trying to, in a space that's just utterly contaminated by, academic staff who don't have to work to those standards, and maybe sharing equipment and all sorts of stuff. The whole thing just goes up in smoke at this point, because you're going to be building data packages. If I have to bring a small company to Bradley's attention, and they start to do due diligence, they're going to be looking at things like, what was the standard of laboratory practice that was used here? Were you able to keep your stuff confidential? Yes, we could. And they said, but when I was on site last time, there was that girl through from the chemistry department. She's a student. What's she doing wandering about? These are real issues. And again, if you've got the right facilities around, you can get around these problems. But they can be a real handbrake for companies, just not being able to move on to the right facilities.
So I know we could go on and on. We're already a little bit over time. So I want to bring us to the conclusion here. I want to give everyone a chance to sort of give some final thoughts. And maybe, if there are startups listening, what are the big takeaways you want to leave them with?
So for me, it's, you need to build up that personal relationship with the people that you want to partner with, and even get investment from, to generate that champion who is going to be, your champion for your cause within their respective organizations. It's a lot easier to do that over coffee at networking, after a panel, when you have that conversation, and it's not just such a hard sell, because we all have our sort of our barriers up when someone just approaches us and does a cold pitch. But if there's that sort of more friendly conversation over coffee, what's going on? How are you? This is what we're doing. Does this, ask me what I'm interested in before you pitch me a slide deck. That's it. And you can do that by having that sort of casual conversation at these events.
Yeah, I agree completely with that, Bradley. I think it's, for a small startup, don't mythologize anything. It's human beings talking to human beings. I think there's this mystique that there's something strange happens at networking events, and No, it's not. The person you talk to, whether they're an investor or a big pharma BD guy, probably needs to go to the toilet at least as many times as you do a day. They're normal humans, right? So just remember that. It shouldn't be a terrifying encounter. And if it is, and you're being made to feel terrified, that's probably something to do with the person you're talking to. It's not you. But joking aside, it's get the homework done. Have a plan. And don't expect things to happen overnight. There's a gestation period. It takes a while. There's a moment when everybody kind of instinctively knows the conversation is now crystallized into probably early stage business discussions. 6 months ago, it wasn't. We were still kind of range finding with each other. So for a small company, and they can do it, build a plan, know where you're going, and set realistic timelines. Don't expect it all to happen in the blink of an eye. And Bradley said so much of it already. Just do the homework. Understand why you're talking to Astellas today and not GSK. Because my heart goes out to you, Bradley. You must just get this all the time. Well, we make veterinary products. And you say, well, Astellas doesn't do veterinary, that sort of thing. Yeah. Yes,
I agree with everything that's been said there. I think the make a plan, the persistence piece matters, and actually sticking to, making a good plan, sticking to that plan. And I'm not saying that has to be a rigid plan where you don't, flex a little bit here and there, but actually it does matter. And knowing that these things do take time, they do take a number of interactions, and also realistically that a lot of those interactions are going to feel a little bit lacking in that you won't get a response back that you expect, or you might not get a response at all. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not the right place to be putting your attention, because I suspect, Bradley, he will have had emails from various people, but then he'll bump into them, or the timing or the focus or the modality might be right at a different point. So sticking to your plan, doing your homework, sticking to your plan does matter there. And actually, I suppose, going back to the people piece, the trust and the seeking advice piece, it does matter. There are people who are friendly and helpful and will give you half an hour of their time, and you can pick their brains, ask them questions. I think there is, you need to ask the right people questions, because there are lots of people who give you advice and maybe they're not the best people to seek advice from. But I do think, especially if you base yourself in a location or affiliate yourself with an area or an innovation ecosystem that has helpful, useful people who've been there, done it, can tell you what they know, save you a load of time. Or if they don't know, they can send you on to someone else. Yeah.
So just to pick up on that point about advice, yes, people are very, very generous with their time, especially in Cambridge. There is that. And I'll quote Peter Cowley, who's a local business angel here. He said, when you're asking for money, when you want money, ask for advice, and when you want advice, ask for money. Because in that sense, and because again, just that asking for that advice, I get to know what you're after, what you like, and if it resonates, then we can have a further conversation. My guard is not up if you're asking for advice. My guard is up if you're asking for money, just instinctively. So that's a great way of actually engaging with people as well, because you ask for some advice, then you get to know what I'm looking for. Yes. In that sense, so that helps you with your homework.
Great advice all around. Thank you all so much. It's been really great to have such a robust discussion, so many different perspectives. And I know this has been a really helpful discussion for our listeners who are maybe in the midst of some of this. That concludes this episode of the Pharma Forum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about other installments in the series, at pharmaforum.com/podcast. The Pharma Forum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher, and Podme, where you can find and subscribe by searching for Pharma Forum. And don't forget to visit our website, where you can sign up for daily news and analysis bulletins, and to follow us on Twitter at Pharma Forum. Thanks for listening.